long-awaited return to the program is at Sabres Prospects. That's where you would follow him on Twitter, and that's what he does. He tracks the Sabres prospects. He really tracks NHL prospects and does it like nobody else. It is Kris Baker joining Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Daddy Bakes, good to see you again, man.
Great to see all of your faces here on our Brady Bunch grid, and I think we've all gotten used to the Brady Bunch grid at this point over the last few months, but I feel like the band is back together, man. So it's good to be with you guys.
In spirit. Yeah, it's not our usual preferred gathering, but it'll do for now. And the show has been devoid of hockey talk, and it's because there hasn't been too much. And yes, there was a draft, and the Taylor Hall signing was big for the Buffalo Sabres, but with no games to be played for a couple of months, everybody's just so into the Bills and even UB football, I think, more. But I think it's time. The leaves are falling off the trees. The NBA and Major League Baseball are finally done with their seasons. Now we're kind of getting in that mood again. I think our Western New York internal clocks are starting to crave hockey. So wanted to have you on, Kris. And there has been a lot going on, though. I mean, little things here and there over the months. But what would you just say if I were to ask you, what do you think the state of the Buffalo Sabres is right now?
Can only go up from where they've been. So, with that said, to your point, this is normally when hockey is kind of in full swing. We always say, oh, well, you got to look at the standings on American Thanksgiving, and that tells you it's an indicator, right, if the team's going to make the playoffs or not. Well, what's our new one this year? Valentine's Day? I don't know, but the Sabres themselves, I mean, they're still making moves. I think that they have an idea. They're really trying to construct a roster from top to bottom all the way in Rochester as well that, gets guys that can compete. They got to get experienced guys in here. They made a move for a depth goaltender this week that maybe we can get into for a little bit. But, I mean, I like the moves. I like the draft. You can kind of get an idea of the type of player that they're looking for. They're definitely looking to fill roles. It's not straight up just let's get the best talent, offensive talent across the board. You look at some of the depth signings that they've made. It's clear that they have a vision for slotting guys into certain roles, and I think that's a healthy way to look at building a roster. And I think the draft also, we talked about it, did they draft the best player available to draft? We won't know that for a couple of years. But I think going into the draft, I think they had a profile of a player that they needed to get, and they definitely hit that. I think they needed a scoring winger, and that's what they got with Jack Quinn. So that was kind of the first domino. As they entered free agency, they made some key moves here. And, I get hammered on, I think, a lot on social media for maybe being a little too positive at times. I have the ability to be negative, but right now I don't see a reason to be negative. I'm giving Kevin Adams and his team kind of a blank canvas, a clean slate. And so far, I think they're doing a pretty decent job, given the resources and some of the cost concerns that exist in the organization.
How hesitant, though, are you to give Kevin Adams a clean slate? I know you said you are, but did you have to grapple with that at all, given the track record of the burn rate that the Pagulas have gone through with their GMs, not only in terms of how it's happened and that they fall out of favor, but they fall out of favor quickly. So does Kevin Adams, does he have a blank canvas with the Pagulas, do we think?
Well, he certainly has a really good relationship with them, and there's trust there, where I think that he's off to a more of a head start than Jason Botterill was, or, Tim Murray was for that matter, where he's been in the organization in different roles on the business side of things. I think that there's trust built up, and that lends to just a more seamless work relationship. You can get things done quicker. From my perspective, to answer your question directly, I mean, maybe my stance would be different. Maybe he wouldn't have a clean slate if I didn't know Kevin Adams, or at least, we're not great pals, but we come from the same hockey pedigree with Chris Hicks and the old Niagara Scenic days. And I've had a lot of knowledge about Kevin Adams as a person and the type of human being that he is, which I have no reason to think that he won't succeed in the job. So that's kind of my perspective. And again, maybe that's me being too positive, and that's a fair criticism of me, but that's where I'm at when looking at Kevin Adams and the start that he's given. I'm not the skeptic. And I look at the players that he's brought in, and I can see why they brought in the players that they did. Tim, you and I talked about maybe 6 or 8 months ago, just about, maybe a Sabres, projecting what they might do. This was before Kevin Adams was the GM. And we talked about maybe Taylor Hall being a guy that they go out and look for. And they did. And they got the big fish. Now, was that Kevin Adams? No, that's Ralph Kruger being a closer. But I have no reason to believe that the Kevin Adams and Ralph Kruger conglomerate can do good things here moving forward.
What do you make of the public perception of Kevin Adams and, when he was hired, and just some of the things that people said because of the way everything went down and then all the cost cutting? What do you make of the public perception? And then how do you think, or what do you think he's done, I guess, to push back against that with some of these moves?
Sabres fans have every right and reason to be skeptical of everything. Okay, so when it comes to the perception of Kevin Adams, I totally get why they're just like, show me. It's that whole show me, don't blow me thing, right? And they're wanting to be shown right now. I think they're eager to get this going. They want to see the team on the ice. Everything's on paper. So the public perception, I totally get it. Where they've been, their chains have been yanked for many years here, really since the Bagulas bought the team and Terry fired his shot of, the whole reason for existence of his team is to win the Stanley Cup. And I think he put a 3-year, not a guarantee, but I mean, the Bagulas did this to themselves too, with a lot of their bravado and, the way that they went about their tank very brazenly. And you can argue whether that tank paid off or not. I still don't think that it has. I don't care if you got the player. You haven't won jack squat. So I get the fans' perception of this is just another move and everything else. Again, my stance on Kevin and Ralph, again, I think Ralph really is running the show, if we're going to be honest here. But it's, I have history with Kevin where I have no reason to believe that he's not going to build a really quality club moving forward.
What do you think about the immediate expectations for this coming season? If this is year 2 of the Ralph Kruger program, what do the Sabres need to do? What do you need to see from the Sabres to think that's going in the right direction?
Got to balance the lineup and don't be afraid to try different things and don't rush your young players up. Okay, so there's no pressure to have Jack Quinn in the lineup right now because they went out and did a pretty decent job filling out the roster in free agency. I think give your young players a chance to breathe a little bit, let their development happen organically. Casey Middlestat, same thing. Okay, he's going to be 22 years old in a couple of weeks here. But, Casey Middlestat just needs to worry about Casey Middlestat. He doesn't need to worry about Dylan Cousins. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Casey Middlestat needs to see the long haul for his career and just get better and work his way up towards making the Sabres. I don't think he's going to be on the roster this year, at least to start. Getting Taylor Hall, don't be afraid to try different things. I think Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall are going to be locked in together. Find them a winger. Try different wingers. Is it Olsen? Is it Sam Reinhart? Don't be afraid to try Sam Reinhart at center if Eric Stahl is not your bona fide number 2 guy to anchor that line. So I think that my expectations are that, I said at the top, it can only go up. I'm sick and tired of watching, the hockey that I've had to watch when I sit down to watch an NHL game. I spend a lot of times up here in this office watching junior hockey and European hockey. When I go and watch the Sabres play, I want to watch a quality product, not as a fan, just as of the Sabres, but as a consumer of hockey. I haven't had that luxury. So I think it's going to take them to try different things. And again, I think that they did a good job bringing experienced players in here to allow their younger players like a Middlestat, like a Will Borgen, who's a right shot defenseman who can play in the NHL probably. Build a good culture down in Rochester too. Get them winning. Got to win at every level of the organization. So that's really my expectation, Jonah, if I'm answering your question in a satisfactory way to you, is that I want to see a team that competes, and I want to see a team that's not afraid to try different things if it leads to wins.
What do you think the Taylor Hall signing does for the organization? Because there's so many different ways to look at it, especially in the context of a 1-year contract. There is some skepticism that you could look at. Maybe they're just buying themselves a draft pick at the trade deadline or what have you, or some assets. Maybe it's a PR move. But there are some actual success metrics that you can plug onto the team right now when you have a player like Taylor Hall, and depending on what line you put him on. I guess what's your quick and dirty overview of the palatability of this signing? Was it and whether why it was done?
It's a whole shot in the arm for the organization and really the city, if you think about it. We've always heard about the Sabres maybe having a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting players. Well, here was the marquee free agent, and he chose to come to Buffalo largely because of his relationship with Ralph Kruger. So I think that, the key to Hall is keeping him healthy. I think you want to weave him right into the leadership group on that team right away. If Jack Eichel's your captain, I would not be surprised at all if they give an A to Taylor Hall and they show him that he's trusted, he's part of the success of this team, both on and off the ice.
Unless he's a bonehead, that should be automatic.
It should be automatic.
Unless he comes in and does something, and he's not. Unless he comes in and does something totally out of left field, then he absolutely has the A coming into the season.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think that, from a counting stats perspective, you want to see 35 goals, 90 points, somewhere around there as a modest benchmarks for him to hit. But I think it boosts the entire roster. Your power play gets better. Victor Olofsson, who's still a young player, doesn't have to shoulder the load of being this guy that is, accounting for X% of your goals. He can just kind of do his thing and maybe get better matchups. Remember when the Sabres were really good in those early 2000s, and Thomas Vanek didn't have to play on the top line. He scored 41 goals one year, largely because of the matchups he was getting. Maybe an Olofsson has the same type of success rate now, that maybe he can play down the lineup if they're trying different things, and you maybe put him with Stahl and Skinner. I look at it, let's pod these players, man. Okay? Eichel and Hall together, Skinner and Stahl together, mix and match Reinhart, maybe Tage Thompson, who's got a great shot also, and, coming off the injury last year, maybe he can play a bigger role up the lineup. That's why I keep saying try different things. It doesn't have to be all Olsen and Reinhart. And maybe Reinhart is a center, like I said. But to go back to Hall, I don't see it as a one-year deal. I think they're really going to try to show him that this can work. He and Jack can maybe make magic on ice, and he can sign another contract. And then you have to worry about the trickle-down effect from there. What do you do with Reinhart after that? How do you handle the expansion draft? What kind of trades do you do to maneuver for the expansion draft? So there's a lot of story to still be written here. But it's all moot, by the way, if Taylor Hall doesn't stay healthy.
One of the strange things about Taylor Hall and Buffalo being a locale that you can draw him to is that he doesn't – other than the island, other than Long Island, he's played on all the markets that you would put below Buffalo in terms of its appeal. Edmonton, Newark, or wherever. He's probably going to come to Western New York and think, well, this is. He's been here before, obviously, as a visitor, but he's going to spend some time here and think, hey, this is a utopia, hockey heaven, maybe.
Yeah, hockey heaven, where careers go to die, right? Maybe not anymore, but it's kind of the same thing that we said about when Skinner waived his no trade to come to Buffalo. Close to home, the Ontario guys, you see a lot of, if Ontario guys, like we always say, it's like, look at Joe Thornton. All he's doing by playing for the Maple Leafs this year is checking something off the bucket list for a hockey player. You know what I mean? And maybe coming to Buffalo is the next best thing for some of these guys that are Ontario boys, but yeah, Buffalo, you can't compare the Buffalo market. The one thing I will say, I will take exception to one thing you say about Long Island. Yeah, the market has been kind of goofy, and they had, the SUV in the corner when they were playing in the rink and all this goofy stuff. Look at what that team has done, though. They lost John Tavares, their cornerstone, for nothing.
I'm talking.
I know what you're saying, but it's like I love what they're doing there. Yeah, but I love what they're doing there. I hear you, though. I know why you mentioned that. I do.
Hey, Kris, when you talk about balancing the lineup and generating more scoring chances that aren't coming from Jack Eichel when Jack Eichel's on the ice, my question is why is Hall and Eichel wedded together in your projections and really everybody looking at the Sabres roster when it seems like a player like Taylor Hall might be the perfect guy to try to create scoring when Jack Eichel's not out there, take pressure off Eichel and get more opportunities, even within a power play, to score that isn't so reliant on one player, because we've shown that, or Skinner's shown, Olofsson's shown, these guys can score with Jack Eichel on the wing. Eichel doesn't really need Taylor Hall to finish for him. Why is it assumed that they're going to play together all the time?
So there's two ways to look at it, and I love that question because, I look at the Bruins. They just load up their top line, Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand, and they just kind of go, and they're the pace setter for the team. They log the most minutes, they're the number one power play, and that's one philosophy. But then you can look at what Pittsburgh's done with Sidney Crosby, and they've put guys like, Connor Sherry playing with him and Brian Rust and Dominic Simone, who they didn't even sign. And, they let the strength of the centerman carry two maybe average wingers, and that allows them to put more balance together. The thing that leads me to believe that Hall and Eichel are going to be locked together was Ralph's comments when he recruited Taylor Hall, and he talked about their competitive nature of pushing each other, and it really seems like he's going to try to have them play together and maybe deploy that Bruins philosophy and maybe less of a Penguins philosophy when it comes to using those two players.
How do you think it'll work? They're both kind of puck possession guys. How do you think they'll mesh on the ice just from a play style standpoint?
It's a good question, and it's one of those things that we need to see come out. I don't know if Taylor Hall has really played with a center the caliber of Jack Eichel, where, maybe Taylor Hall's possession numbers have been as good as they have been because he's had to have the puck on a stick to kind of carry the line that way. I think it's one of those things where you need to see it happen to really understand if it's going to be successful or not, and that's kind of where I land with it. What I can tell you is that, Taylor Hall is, I think when he's not the focus of attention for defenders, I think he's going to thrive. So if folks are really drawn to Eichel and maybe he gets a double in some ways and guys are just closing in on Jack, that's going to leave someone open, and it could be Taylor Hall in a lot of instances, and that's going to allow him to use his gifts to score and, his shooting skills and everything else.
Before we get into more of the prospect angle of it, just to kind of wrap up we can talking about the defense on this team. I know it's a big issue. It's a little boring to me because it seems like we're talking about the same things over and over and over again when it comes to the defense. But goaltending, how would you just give your assessment? I know that's your wheelhouse, and I always love getting your opinions on the organizational depth when it comes to goal, and that still seems to be an unaddressed position so far this offseason.
It is. If they have a weakness, I think it's still goaltending. When that second day of free agency started, it was clear to me anyways, if I was in that room with them, it's like, hey guys, this is go time to go out and get Corey Crawford for 2 years. So when you look at free agency, Braden Holtby was out there. He signed a 2-year deal with Vancouver. I think it was in the neighborhood of $4 million. And to me, that was the benchmark for what a guy like Corey Crawford was going to want. Corey Crawford had a great year last year in Chicago, and he would have been a great fit here. That allowed you maybe some flexibility to do something with Hutton if you didn't believe in him. And I'm not sure that Hutton's going to rebound and maybe, earn the dollars that he's getting. So I have concerns there. Obviously, why they didn't pursue a guy like Corey Crawford, because they were waiting to keep those dollars in line because they were in the mix for Hall, and they ended up getting the big fish there. So that's, you can see it happen now working backwards, why they didn't pursue Corey Crawford. I thought that was a miss, though. Not getting him. So when you look at the organization top to bottom, to kind of go what happened this week with them signing Dustin Tokarski to a 2-year contract. So you have a 31-year-old guy. He's got somewhere, I think just north of 30 NHL games on his resume. And I think that's important. When you need your organizational 3 or 4 that generally you're going to stash in Rochester to have NHL game experience. They didn't really have that right now. If you're looking at, before Tokarski came into the picture, you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, they really want to grab the reins and be the guy in Rochester for the next 2 years. And Jonas Johansson, who was an AHL All-Star last year, I suspect that they would have never gone out to get Tokarski if they could get a 2-year contract with Johansson, because that's the guy then that they could have exposed in the expansion draft. The Tokarski move was all about getting veteran depth in there. He can help with Luukkonen's development, but he's also the guy that we can expose to Seattle. Sabres are in trouble, though, man, after this year with goaltending. I don't think there's any question about that. No one should expect Luukkonen to be ready to come up to the NHL after this season. Allmark has to have a good year. You got him on a 1-year contract right now. Hutton's got 1 year left, and I think the writing's on the wall for him. So what's the plan? We need to find out, but I think they're in trouble after this year. As far as if you're already looking forward to 2021-22, I don't know what the plan is yet.
Wow. You got to build a bridge to Jackson Baker, and there's a lot of pieces in between there,
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces in between there if you're looking at 17-year-old Jackson Baker coming up and playing. But no, I think that, the Sabres were looking at getting a goalie, entering day 2 of the draft. I strongly believe that they had pick number 100 early in the 4th round, and they were going to take a goaltender there. There were a couple that they were looking at. They had to use 100 to get up and take the German forward, Peterka, and that kind of killed that. They had some other prospects they were looking at, maybe that they would burn a 5th rounder on, and they went right before the Sabres were up. So they didn't get a chance to take another goalie to get him in the system. But again, these are guys that are going to be 5 years off from helping at the NHL level anyways. Eric Portillo is going to be at University of Michigan if they end up playing hockey this year. I mean, I know they're going to, they're scheduled to play, but even a guy like that's probably 3 or 4 years out. So big problems, I think, in net for the Sabres moving forward. They're doing well addressing the skaters, and they have some sorting out to do with their defensemen. I still think that goaltending is the most important position in hockey. A lot of people want to tell me I'm crazy for saying that, and they're really, I don't know what they're going to do right now.
How are you, Kris Baker, at Sabres Prospects on Twitter, and NHL scouts out there going to evaluate young players this winter? We know that the Ontario Hockey League has said no body checking. You have some additional information that I wasn't aware of regarding some other junior leagues out there and their rules moving forward. I guess how would you describe this landscape that if there is hockey, that's still if all this can happen and everybody passed their tests and things don't crash and who knows what else, but what are we looking at here?
You really got to front load your scouting while they're playing. I think Europe already has stopped playing in certain countries. The Czech Republic shut down for a couple weeks. Sweden and Finland are having surges where certain organizations are shutting down. So, if you have the ability to get out and see live viewings, you got to get them in when you can. That's now, or the past couple of weeks. But, for a Sabres organization that really shrunk their scouting staff, and they were already going to plan to move to video anyways, this couldn't set up any better for them. Video scouting has its pros and cons. Okay, so you can watch a greater volume of games in a day. And I can attest to that. I watch 4 or 5 games sometimes a day, which is nuts. And I'm fried from it. My brain sucks because of it. But, you also, the con to that is that you only see what's on the frame. And when you're scouting, you got to see the whole picture. So there's disadvantages to rely on just video. In an ideal world,
there's a reason that hockey is considered a terrible television sport.
Yeah. And that's part of it.
You can only see what's right in front of the camera.
Yep, and that's a challenge because you do want to see, you have to see the whole picture. So there's issues with that. Ideally, you would use video scouting to deploy your live eyes. If you're looking at 10 players on video, pull out the 3 that you want to go watch live. You might not have that opportunity this year. Now, to your comment earlier about what the OHL is doing, they're going to a no body contact style of the sport this year. And that's also filtering down to other leagues, the OJHL, which is their junior A league in Ontario. They're going, they put out their 5-on-5 regulations before we hopped on, about an hour before we did this today, where no body contact, players have to wear masks. You have to wear the bubble face mask. There's going to be strict guidelines for who they're going to let into the arena. Now, that's only in Ontario. But I suspect similar mechanisms are going to be in place for the Alberta Junior A League, the British Columbia Junior A League. We don't even know when the WHL is going to start. The OHL seems to want to start in months from now. We're in November. I mean, we're still about 3 months out before the OHL is even thinking about playing. So everything's upside down right now. If you're the Sabres and you're looking at the pool of draft players, draft eligible players, the USHL is still playing. Their games are set to start this weekend. The NAHL, which is, really you're only taking goalies out of there, okay? They're playing. There's games that have been happening, but I expect everything to be shut down, man. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but you can already see it. USHL games are going to be canceled in pockets, and at some point you're going to have a pause across the board, just like what's been going on in Europe. Czech Republic, they were playing games for about a good solid 3 weeks to a month, and then their health minister just said, we got to shut everything down. They tried to shut down for just 2 weeks over there. It was about 3.5, 4 weeks. Now they're going to start to try to play games again this weekend. We'll see where it goes. It's just a weird year, man. I think video is going to rule the day when it comes to scouting, and it's going to come with some flaws.
Kris, what do you think, or what have you heard about local hockey, junior clubs, recreation, high schools, youth? What is your insight on whether they'll be able to play, when they'll be able to play, how the game will be played locally this coming months?
I think your guess is probably as good as mine, Jonah, honestly. I'm plugged into, the 16U and 18U ranks just by virtue of having a niece and nephew that play at a very high level at those age groups. And like in Chicago right now, they've been going to Detroit and trying to go to Pittsburgh to play games, but every plan gets shut down usually. I think my nephew plays in Chicago. He's only played 4 games so far. Usually they've had 20 to 25 games in. Here in Buffalo, I don't know what the plan's going to be. I mean, we know the junior Sabres, the junior A team that playing in that OJHL that we just talked about with those rules and regulations, they just opted out for the year. And then the junior Sabres 16U and all the age groups below, they went on pause because of a COVID outbreak. So scheduling's tough because a lot of these higher level, they play out of state a lot. And not every state's different right now. Illinois is different from Michigan. The junior Sabres, they play a lot of games against like Little Caesars and Honey Baked in Detroit. And, even going towards, North Jersey, there's a couple of the Avalanche and the Rockets and things like that. There's good teams out there that they want to play. Everything's up in the air right now, Jonah. I just don't know how it's going to shake out. It's such a weird year. Coming into this year, like when we were talking about this in summer, we were saying, be lucky if you have a regular season that starts in January or February, and maybe that's how it still ends up.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about crossing state lines and all those restrictions that you have, quarantining, especially teams coming into New York and all the tournaments that happen, whether it's at the Northtown Center or, downtown, whatever, you might have a situation where if you are allowed to play here in New York, that you're just playing the same teams over and over again. I mean, you might get
That's right.
sick of it, but that's obviously high school. They might be able to have their games, but you're talking about the youth and how dependent they are on teams coming in from Pittsburgh and Cleveland and wherever else just to put these tournaments together. Those probably get dashed pretty quickly. Anything else, Kris, that you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
No, I think that, just to kind of go back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation, I mean, the prospects are still playing right now. There's games in Sweden. Like when we end this call, and I still have work to do, but on that TV will be a game in Sweden. I'll still be putting out video highlights for the guys that are playing. There are a lot of things to like about some of these young players. I think that really more than ever, though, it's going to be about patience, especially with this year. This year, a lot of these guys that I'm reporting on right now, the Sabres are going to try to get over here to play in Rochester. Oskari Laaksonen, who plays for the Pelicans in the Finnish League, is having a great start to his year. Arttu Ruotsalainen, who, as of over the weekend was a top scorer in the Finnish League, young, crafty forward who could really challenge for a roster spot on the Sabres this year. So even though we don't have a lot of hockey going on right now at the NHL or AHL level here in the States, there's a lot going on still in Europe as long as they're playing and have the ability to play, and we'll be keeping an eye on them all. And I just wanted to make sure I got that plug in to watch the Twitter feed for video highlights and everything else.
At Sabres Prospects, we'll be plugging the whole thing. We'll do it through the show. We'll remind everybody. It's compelling content because you can't get it anywhere else unless you know exactly who it is that's in the Sabres organization and you have Google Alert set up or whatever, or you can just have Kris Baker do it for you, and he'll give you all the updates on where these guys are playing, what team they're with this year, who they got loaned out to, whether they've been traded, transcribing tweets or whatever the hell you'd need to do, or not translating, I should say.
And I'll do my best to reply to those questions after the election dust is settled. I'm trying to not pay as much attention to Twitter right now, but I go on there, I tweet, and I get the hell out of there, man. That's kind of the plan right now.
That's smart to do. It's a good philosophy. Kris Baker, again, follow him at Sabres Prospects on Twitter. One of the great Fs of TGAF. And he hasn't been on in a while, so it's good to have one of our best Fs back on TGAF.
Appreciate the time.
Of course.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Nice seeing your faces. We'll do it soon, hopefully live.
See you soon, bud.
All right, man.